So on the last slide, we brought it back to risk taking and asked the question, are adolescents really engaging in risk taking behavior and are they doing so because of deficits in some kind of cognitive ability? And so here, again, revisiting some of those ideas that we were talking about, are adolescents more likely to feel invincible, which is part of the personal fable? Are they more likely to subscribe to the personal fable broadly, like I'm unique and bad things won't happen to me? And like I said already on the earlier slide, there's really no evidence that adolescents are that different than adults in these ways. So other researchers have tried to, or theorists have tried to explain, well, we do know that adolescents are making risks. So what is actually happening? Is it because they are evaluating consequences differently or outcomes differently? So we're going to explore that on the next slide. You don't need to be responsible for each of the 5 steps that follow this behavioral decision theory, but I just want to talk about it broadly. The idea here is that when we're thinking about if adolescents are weighing consequences differently than adults, or if they're processing information in a different way. So using this approach, we could look to see how adolescents would respond and how adults would respond. In this approach by Slavic and colleagues, essentially all behaviors can be analyzed as an outcome of certain steps. And it certainly isn't the case that you're sitting in a moment, or trying to make a decision, and you're consciously going through each of these steps in order. This process is quick. This process doesn't have to be super conscious. You're not necessarily aware of it, but nevertheless, you are going through these changes. So, for example, let's say that you are 16 years old and you went to a party with a friend. Your parents don't know that you went to this party, and you were going to get a ride home from this friend, but that friend started to drink, and now that friend is too drunk to be driving home. And essentially, your friend is ready to leave, and they present you with this option, this question, like, "Come on, let's go, let's leave." In this moment, you have the ability to identify alternative choices. So, for example, maybe you could walk home. Maybe, if you're close enough, maybe you could ride with a different friend. Maybe you could call an Uber. Maybe you could call mom and dad. So these are your choices that you're identifying. For the sake of simplicity for this example, let's go with that you identified 2 choices. I could either go with my friend or I could call mom and dad. So then you're next, number 2, identifying consequences that follow each choice. What are the consequences that could follow going with my friend? We could get pulled over. I could get into big trouble. We could crash. We can hurt ourselves. We could hurt other people. Or, I mean, one of the consequences might be that I get home safe and my parents don't find out about it. The consequences that follow the choice of calling mom and dad are I get home safely. But maybe another consequence, my mom and dad are really mad at me, or I get in trouble, or I get grounded. Number 3 is a next step, again, evaluating the costs and benefits of each possible consequence. So what could possibly, happen? What are the costs and benefits? The cost of hurting myself is significant. The costs of getting grounded from my parents, it depends on the parents, obviously, might be really significant. Significant. The benefits of calling my parents is great in terms of getting home safely. The benefits of going with my friend are also great if we get home safely because then my parents don't find out. So you're evaluating each of these. And then with number 4, you're assessing the likelihood of each possible consequence. So knowing my parents, if I call them, I'm going to get in trouble, but the punishment won't be that bad, or it won't be that severe. What's the likelihood of getting into a car accident if I ride with my friend? And then basically you take all of this information and make some kind of decision. So maybe in that description, you were able to think about how adults might answer or come up with different evaluations and consequences that might be similar to or different than adolescents. And research has actually examined this. Do adolescents use different processes than adults in identifying or estimating, evaluating um, these decisions? And by and large, the answer is no. Adults and adolescents are using similar processes. They're using the same kind of theory. They might have different consequences because, let's say, for an adolescent, getting in trouble is not as significant in terms of going to jail as it is for an adult, or you're not, fearful of losing your job as an adolescent versus an adult. You don't have people to take care of typically in adolescence as you do as an adult. But really the process through which we go through to come up with our decision is no different. So we can't use that as a reason to explain why adolescents are engaging in risk-taking behaviors to a higher degree than adults. So to bring everything together, we know that there are lots of changes that are taking place to adolescents' thinking, their cognition. We know that there are changes in the brain that are taking place. We have theoretical and empirical support for what changes are happening and why they're taking place the way that they are. When it comes to risk taking, we still don't fully know how adolescents are reaching conclusions about in their decision making, about which risks to take or which risks to not take. What we do know is that there are many ways in which adolescents are no different than adults, or very little when it comes to adults. So personal fable in terms of that behavioral decision theory that I talked about on the last slide, little differences there. What we do know about adolescents is that they are more susceptible to peer pressure, and peers matter. Could this be the most significant role in risk-taking behavior? Some of the research from Steinberg in the beginning would suggest that, peers are playing a huge role in our risk-taking decisions. We also know that in adolescence, we go through a little surge. There are individual differences, but in impulsivity and sensation seeking. So those that are driving us to want to have this increase in dopamine, this excitement, this reward. And so potentially this is a factor that is leading us to be higher in risk-taking behaviors in adolescence. We also know that this is the first time in our lives where we're spending a lot of time unsupervised, so really having to test our decision-making skills and also our self-regulation skills. So context is really important here. So in context, again, we're not just unsupervised, we're also spending time with our peers. So in short, this is the last slide. We know that adolescents are engaging in risk-taking behaviors to a higher degree than in adulthood. But this is an open area of study. We need to do more research to fully understand why, or what are the mechanisms. And it's not just one factor, it's surely going to be and is a accumulation of different factors. So I hope that this lecture on cognitive development was interesting to you. You learned some new information. I'm here to answer any questions, again, by email, or if you choose to come to office hours. And if there was anything that didn't make sense to you, please reach out, and I'd love to help in any way that I can. Talk to you soon.